Well, hey friends, it's me, Pastor Doug, with another word of encouragement for the day for today, Monday, April 4th. And this week we are continuing our I Still Am series where we've been exploring the 7 I am statements that Jesus makes throughout the Gospel of John, including things like I am the bread of life and I am the light of the world. And this week we come to a phrase that Jesus uses in what is typically known as the upper room discourse or the farewell discourse. This is sort of the last few moments that Jesus had with his disciples in the upper room the night that he was arrested and the night before he was ultimately crucified. And this passage is filled with all kinds of rich theological truths that Jesus expounds on and explains to the disciples. But one of the things that Jesus says in this passage in John chapter 14 is he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he was saying that to comfort and reassure his disciples who were concerned about what was going to happen next and where he was going to go. So Jesus speaks those words to reassure him. But in saying that, I am the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus was making some striking claims about his own nature, about the fact that he is the way to God. He's the only way. And today's passage I want to read is out of 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. And it kind of continues on this theme of Jesus being the one way to God. In this passage, Paul writes to his young protege, Timothy, and he says this. He says, for there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself as a ransom for all people. So what Paul is saying there is you have mankind and you have God, and there's a gap between them. And that gap, of course, is sin, rebellion, disobedience, right? Because we have rebelled against God. We have created this gap, this chasm between us and God. And Paul is saying that Jesus filled that gap, that Jesus took on the sin and the rebellion and the punishment for that rebellion of all of humanity and bore that for us. And in so doing, reconciled mankind and God. That's essentially what he's saying here. And that word mediator is such a powerful word. Maybe you have had to be a mediator at some point in your life, or maybe you've needed a mediator at some point in my life. I know as a parent, when my kids were growing up, they needed a mediator all the time, right? There was conflict, there was disagreement, there were arguments, there were fights. They would fight over items or fight over a particular spot in the car or fight over the remote. And so they would often need a mediator to step in and sort of reconcile the differences between the two. And what Paul is saying is that Jesus fulfilled that on a cosmic scale, that Jesus fulfilled the role of a mediator between God and mankind and reconciled us into right relationship with God. It's a beautiful truth that Jesus speaks about in John 14, but that Paul picks up in this passage in 1 Timothy. So aren't you grateful that we have a mediator that reconciled us to God? Friends, be encouraged by this, and we'll see you tomorrow.